Experience the frightening story of Luz María López as we journey into the heart of darkness. Called "This Marriage Was the Start of Hell." Luz María López's case. This real crime documentary shows how a promising love story turned into lies, domestic violence, and a shocking Guatemalan crime. An upcoming true crime documentary will explore Luz Maria's tragic life, twisted love, and fight for justice under unimaginable suffering. Hello, and today, we'll investigate another terrible case concerning Luz María López in Guatemala, a country with an alarming crime rate. When she collapsed, Luria's historian showed her transformation from aggressive criminal to lover. Weekly offenses total 100, which is shocking. Nearly 70% of important offenses are unresolved, half of them domestic, according to a 2009 New Yorker story. Guatemala had more civilian deaths than Iraq. Luz María López's tragic story occurred in this fascinating but hazardous country. Beautiful young woman Luz María López is the primary heroine of this tragic story. Though hopeful and romantic, it ended tragically with her reduced to a bag of ashes tossed into a sewer. She went from passion and promise to ashes. The domestic tyrant she was victim of was forgiven with time. While offering many reform opportunities, this case was controversial, giving the perpetrator ways to avoid punishment. Let's thoroughly discuss the details. March 17, 1995. Luz María López at San Cristóbal Verapaz, Queentown. From a tiny family with Brian López and Amaral. An intestinal blockage nearly killed her as a newborn, the youngest of two. Her life was saved by a tough treatment, ignoring doctors' odds projections. Luz María recovered thanks to her mother's prayers, and the surgery, which was mercifully done at a young age, did not hinder her growth. Lori excelled in gymnastics and athletics in school. Traditional choreography also fascinated her. Her creative personality showed in her ability to make friends from diverse cultures. Luz María excelled academically and had skill in other areas. Luz María fought for a better education after graduating and enrolled at a top state university. She chose law and criminalistics since it had always interested her. A lucky meeting, Luz María visited an auto store with her mother in Verapaz as a student. For her brother's 25th birthday, her sister and dad intended to present him a motorcycle from the dealership, something he had always coveted. A kind and insightful young consultant called George greeted them. He advised buyers and showed them the full asset. Once they chose a model, the mother and daughter decided to consult the family patriarch. While departing, they took the SHP card's business card and Luz María left her phone number for remarks. George, the salon consultant, called the girl soon after. However, the conversation was more personal than about the acquisition. George contacted Luria several more times before asking her to a coffee shop. It was obvious he loved the sexy brunette. Lori also liked this handsome young man, but he didn't know how to approach him. She agreed to meet when he suggested. He was a year her junior, but that didn't stop them. They fell in love instantly and grew closer. Both imagined they would live a long and happy life together, and thought it was love at first sight. Despite their parents' misgivings, the virgin pair moved in together after a few months. The young couple married privately 6 months later after thinking their romance was moving too fast. Only close friends were invited to the wedding. The banquet location malfunctioned on the wedding day, threatening the festivities. The couple had to pay a lot more to ensure the wedding occurred smoothly. George, Luz Maria's chosen companion, has publicly available scan data. Born in 1996 in Santa Catalina Ladina, Grace Hart. George was the oldest of 2 sons in a poor family alongside his sibling Pablo. The boys were not pampered due to budgetary constraints. Strangely, he had no hopes for a better life in their youth. Avoiding academic activities and delaying a decent job. Silent, aloof, and occasionally hostile, George struggled to regulate his emotions, affecting his relationships. Despite these obstacles, he pursued his soulmate. He rushed to get married because he was afraid his sweetheart would change her mind after he reached his goal. It is important to remember that Lura's folks didn't trust George at first. They weren't sure what it was about him, but it made them weak in the knees. Their fears were real, but they couldn't stop their daughter from marrying him. As soon as they got married, things started to go badly. The young wife got pregnant, but since she didn't have a college degree, it was hard for her to find a good job. Companies didn't want to hire a pregnant woman with no experience, so her only choice was to take on unpredictable, low-paying work. During this time, her husband lost his job and didn't seem very eager to find another one. Things got worse with money after they had a girl named Alice. Both people in the relationship didn't have jobs and were having trouble paying for simple things like rent. Even though Luz Maria didn't want to at first, George offered that they temporarily move in with his parents because they were in a bad situation and needed to take care of their baby. Luz Maria's mother, who knew how hard things were for them, kept telling her to go home, but Luz Maria stayed with George because she thought things would get better. One time, Luz Maria's mom went to see George's parents and saw something that made her sad. The situation for Luz Maria was terrible. She had very little food and was being abused by George's younger brother, both physically and verbally. I saw George not stand up for his wife and daughter, who were being led astray by their mother, but he did not protect them. Luz Maria finally agreed to go, so she went back to her parents' house. However, George showed up at their door promising to find work. Luz Maria agreed to them getting back together as long as they could live apart from George's parents. After successfully defending her diploma, Luz Maria got the job she wanted at the city prosecutor's office. Her careful planning and hard work paid off, as the family's finances got a lot better. Who or what stayed jobless despite this, since they were counting on Luz Maria's income? His controlling and jealous behavior made their relationship worse, and the fact that he didn't want to work made things even worse. In the story, Luz Maria's tenacity and success are shown as she goes through a hard marriage with George, who struggles to find his path and contribute to their family life. His husband told them that their wife couldn't make social media accounts, and he would get mad if she did it at home by herself. He didn't get any better. They'd often had trouble getting along because of his pointless scenes. Haidt said that his wife was to blame for everything that went wrong in the house. When George lived with his parents, he never stood up for his wife. Instead, he did nothing but watch as his family abused her verbally and sometimes physically. George sometimes beat Luz Maria because she was his property, and he didn't think it was wrong. Luz Maria was being beaten physically because neighbors could hear screams coming from the couple's house all the time. Even though she tried hard to get away from her angry husband, George's sincere apologies made an impression on Luz Maria, who always gave him another chance, even though her parents didn't like it. After a fight on December 15, 2020, Luz Maria and her daughter went to her mother's house for safety. George seemed to feel bad about hurting her and promised that things would get better for her. Luz Maria went back to their hired apartment with him in the middle of January 2021, after she had gained her trust again. George's restaurant. According to forensic experts, the body parts belonged to Luz María López, even though they were badly burned. Right away, the cops were called. It's important to note that Luz Maria's prosecutor's office was on the same street as the horrible discovery. When Luz Maria was examined, it was clear that she had been badly beaten. She had internal bleeding fractures that she had sustained while she was still alive, and there were deep scratches on her neck that showed that she had been strangled. Despite the fact that the body was badly burned, pathologists might be able to show how horrible the crime was. Luz, even though Maria had a difficult physical condition, her parents were able to definitely identify her. George, the husband, was arrested right away and made the main suspect. The reason he did what he did was being looked into. While the investigation was going on, a neighbor who had seen the couple fight often gave Maria's mother a disturbing audio clip in trust. Luz Maria's panicked cries for help were recorded on tape, which is important proof that she was being abused. Although the recording showed that the witness knew what was going on, they did not call the cops or get involved. The cops couldn't include the anonymous source in their investigation because they couldn't find them. She told people in a public talk that they should report domestic violence as soon as possible because it could save lives. Thousands of people protested all over the country and called for action in reaction to the case that got a lot of attention across the country. The evidence against George grew, but he kept denying that he was involved. Street CCTV shows that Luz Maria's workplace could be seen in the couple's car on the day she disappeared. But the tinted windows made it hard to see the people inside. After a closer look, the couple's house had signs of a crime that had happened there, like blood trails and drag marks. Small pieces of burned meat were also found in the trunk of the family car. In order to hide his wife's burned body, George used the double orthopedic mattress he had bought along with its thick plastic cover. People in the neighborhood said they heard George's threats kill his wife and hide her body for a few days before the murder. The crime scene was carefully put back together, giving a very clear picture of what happened on January 19, 2021, the night George struck Luz Maria very badly in a rage, causing her terrible death. After an attempt to burn the body, George's horrible crimes were found, which led to his arrest after a thorough probe. The terrible thing George had done, folding in the smell of burned hair and skin. He quickly put out the fire, wrapped the burned body in plastic, and looked for a place out of the way to hide it so no one would find it. He was afraid that the neighbors would catch him.